As you know, I'm Shannon Von Seggern and work at the Boardman store, Goodwill. I started off as a cashier and I'm now a supervisor, just recently promoted, and I love my job. I love Goodwill. I'm going to share my story with you. It kind of tells you a little bit about how I ended up where I ended up. My late husband passed away in September of 2022, and I very quickly realized that I was going to need to supplement my fixed income with a part-time income. So I started research for part-time employment that I felt would be manageable in my condition. I applied for many part-time jobs, month after month, and going to job interview after job interview, month after month too, only to be told the same thing over and over again. We're sorry, but there are just some things you cannot do. Sure, they left out the words that would have made it sound like discrimination, but they definitely made me feel like I was being discriminated against, all because of me being wheelchair bound. I'd repeatedly hear the same thing. Well, you can't stand for any length of time. You can't do this, or you can't do that. All I heard running through my mind, though, from each of those encounters was, we can't hire you because you're in a wheelchair. And there are just some things you cannot do. Were they wrong? No, of course not. But what they never gave me the opportunity to tell them was all the things that I could do. Or more importantly, tell them how I might modify some of those things to accommodate my disability. Some things I've had to learn for very many years. I came into contact with Goodwill initially in Elyria, while making multiple trips to their store, donating the majority of my late husband's personal belongings. During this time, I was in search of a new place because my current residence was going to be too much for me to not only manage its upkeep physically on my own, but it was also going to be way too expensive financially for me to continue to live there. So my search for a new place eventually brought me from the Cleveland area out here to the Youngstown area. And on June 30th, 2023, I was not only in a new place on my own, but I found myself looking at new surroundings. A place where I could actually start over and make a new life for myself. During this transition of living, I continued my search. For employment, I spent countless hours filling out job applications, submitting copies of my resume, and of course scheduling and attending many job interviews. After just 3 weeks of living out here in the Youngstown area, I had fallen on more hard times. I had barely any food. My washer and dryer just stopped working. Then my vehicle's transmission was failing. And I honestly felt as if my entire world was just completely falling apart, more and more. So while sitting in a parking lot one afternoon, contemplating everything that had gone so horribly wrong in the past 9.5 months, I received a phone call from Heather Yeager. She asked me if I was still interested in a job at Goodwill. Now, I'm not typically a negative person by any means, but every job interview over the course of 9.5 months had resulted in the same outcome, what seemed like one failed interview after another, with each employer telling me, we're sorry, but there are things you just cannot do. So unfortunately, we cannot offer you a job at this time. With the way every previous job interview made me feel like I had failed, I immediately had to tell Heather what was running through my mind at that very instant when she asked me if I was still interested in a job at Goodwill. So I told her, I need to just tell you up front that I am in a wheelchair. Heather replied, okay, well, did you know that we give opportunities to the disabled? So my question to you is, would you like to come in for an interview? I was taken aback by Heather's positive attitude, but also by her willingness to reach out and let me know that being in a wheelchair didn't mean I was incapable. She actually made me feel important at that very instant. So I told her that I would most definitely like to come in for an interview. The next day, I went to my interview, and it went very well. I spoke of my past work experience, as well as how starting to cripple at such a young age had humbled me, but how it never stopped me from learning how to continue to go on living and find new ways to accommodate my disabilities. I explained that after about a decade, I was forced into retirement, which was difficult for me to accept, more so than accepting my body continuously changing, becoming more challenging for everyday self-care, as well as day-to-day living activities. I tried going back to work part-time a couple of times within those first few years, but medically I needed to be retired. It was always ending badly because my body was good. Then in late 2013, I was faced with a huge dilemma, and it became necessary that I had to try to make myself go back to work full-time. Unfortunately, I didn't make it past the first 3 months of employment before I had to accept that working was only making my condition worsen. And just like that, I was once again unable to work. But when my late husband passed away in September of 2022, it became very clear to me very quickly that I most definitely would need to re-enter the workforce, part-time at least, if I was going to be able to supplement my income enough to afford to live on my own. So I started looking for part-time employment that would be doable for someone who's wheelchair bound. I didn't think it would be so difficult to find part-time work either, especially because of my determination and having the drive to succeed no matter the challenges that I may face. What I quickly learned now was that more employers really did discriminate against disabled people. I kept hearing things that I couldn't do because I was in a wheelchair, but without them actually saying those specific words. So it is not to sound like I was being discriminated against, they just didn't say it. But it most definitely made me feel incapable and undeserving of employment. But Goodwill, it didn't make me feel like that, not at all. Goodwill didn't make me feel like I was disabled. It was quite the opposite, actually. Heather Yeager ended up being the first person that I personally met at Goodwill. And Goodwill ended up being the only employer who actually treated me like a real person. Person capable of fulfilling the role as a valued employee. I went for my interview, and by the time I was finished answering all of Heather's questions, speaking of my past work experience as well as sharing my story, she offered me a part-time cashier position at the Boardman Goodwill store. After my husband passed away, Goodwill was there to provide. When I had little to no food, they took the time to help when others looked the other way. I found a place where I felt more than a disabled widow. They made me feel like I was family. So why I chose to apply at Goodwill Industries in the Youngstown District came down to one very important factor, and that was the fact that they made me feel like I mattered. And that's the key word. I felt like I mattered, and I still feel like I matter within Goodwill. I found people who made me feel like I was a real human being, not someone who's just in a wheelchair. I felt like I was valued in the community as well as in the workplace. I quickly learned more about what Goodwill did for the communities and made it my mission to learn even more and become a voice for an astounding nonprofit organization that truly does care about the diversity of all people, the earth we live in, giving back to the communities and all they do across the nation. Goodwill, in my opinion, stands for exactly what their name spells out: goodwill, value, to all communities, providing value to people of all diversities, reducing waste in the landfills by finding new life for millions upon millions of salvaged items, providing employment, job training, and career opportunities to the disabled, veterans, seniors, underemployed, unemployed, as well as many less fortunate people who were once homeless. Goodwill has touched the lives of millions of people, including myself, as well as one of our local store's regular customers who has shopped at the local Youngstown stores for many, many years, purchasing clothing several days a week, every week. This loyal Goodwill customer wants to fill a church or a business establishment building with these items to give to the poor, particularly hoping to provide a gateway for a fresh start for those who may have fallen on hard times because of wrong choices, loss, financial hardship, or other life hardships. Then you have another customer who buys shoes to send them to the less fortunate people of Africa. And yet one other regular customer who buys clothes and shoes, he sends them overseas to his family members who are less fortunate. In short, Goodwill provides a gateway for people to shop for necessities not only for themselves, but for so many. It is also the perfect way to not only continue to support the overall mission that Goodwill has been doing for over 120 years, but it gives so many loyal Goodwill consumers the ability to feel like they can be an extension of giving back to the communities too. Goodwill gave me the opportunity to be a positive face of an amazing nonprofit organization. We truly care about giving back to the communities. They made me feel like a valued family member, rather than just a disabled widow operating a cash register. And as I mentioned, I recently was promoted to supervisor at the Boardman Goodwill store, making me feel even more highly valued than I already did. The greatest feeling they continually give me is always make me feel like I matter, even though I am only part-time. So when I am interacting with the customers, I know that I matter, and I provide every customer with the same super friendly, helpful, knowledgeable, and positive experience that is easily felt with my cheerful, my positive, upbeat personality that is served with a friendly smile that always says, "Thank you for shopping at our Boardman Goodwill store, and thank you for your continued support of Goodwill's mission of giving back to the communities."